isn't mine, it's Mick's. But I just feel that I've got to say it anyway because it's a blessing for me. In 1974, Mick was on holiday with an ex-wife and his mum and dad, and they were abroad, and they got to the airport to get on a plane, and there weren't enough. There was too many people for the plane. They changed the size of the plane, so there was too many people, and they'd overbooked. So they pulled out of a hat names to go onto this plane, and so there was 4 of them, but only 2 were going to go on, and 2 weren't. So he said, that's no good. You can't split the 4 of us up. His mum and dad were a little bit dodgy on their pins. So some landladies from Blackpool had been away just at the beginning of the season, just before the start of the season, had all been away on a big trip themselves on a holiday, but they had to get back. And they came up to him and said, we'll buy your tickets, your 2 tickets. I'll give you some money. So it was just minimal amount, I think, at the time. So these 2 landladies bought the tickets and off they went. So he thought, well, this is great. I've got another day's holiday because we can send a plane the next day. I've got another day's holiday. That's brilliant. So him and his mum, his ex-wife and his mum and dad, they went for another wander around in the beautiful sunshine. It was lovely. Come back to the hotel and it's really sort of eerie in the hotel. And he found out, the rep came up to him and said, you are such a lucky person. So he said, why? He said, that plane has gone down in France and killed every single person on board. Every single... And he was feeling guilty because obviously he'd sold his tickets to 2 people that needed to get on this plane. And then the next day, the rest of the people got flown back. Last year, Mick, it sort of played on his mind a little bit. So last year, we knew exactly where it went down, and we went for a long weekend, and it was a long weekend because it's the middle of France, middle of nowhere, to the site of where this plane went down. He had to go and visit it, and there's a big wall, and there's every single person's name on it. He had a feeling that if he went, he'd be able to spot who it was he'd sold the tickets to. I'm thankful he can't. I'm thankful that God was looking after him for the simple reason because if he hadn't, I would never ever have met him. And to me, he's the best blessing after my kids that God has given me. He looks after me, he protects me. He's got me out of so much trouble. When I first met him, I would have lost everything, my house, everything. And he saved me. So God was looking after me and looking after him. But I thought I'd just come up and tell you that one, because it's really important.
Are you coming now, Mick? Come on, then. Oh, you haven't got long.
Well, 5 minutes. Or I can
2.
do it later. I can't do it in 2. I'll do it later.
2 minutes, I'll do it. You're going to do it?
I can't do it in 2.
Go on, then.
Right, first of all, I'll do my testament as such as quick as I can. My life's 72 years. If you think that can be done quick, June, you're kidding. Yeah, I know. Basically, non-Christian all my life. Reached the age of 48. At skirts with God. Certainly knew he was there. Had a few little events where he kept tapping me on the shoulder and I ignored him. 48, I found myself completely, my whole life destroyed from top to bottom. And I mean that, from top to bottom. I'd always had plenty of money. I'd always had a good job. I'd always had big cars, always had big houses. You name it, boy, I had it. I was what can be commonly called as an evil man. And if you sit back and say, well, I can't be like that. Yes, I was. Take my word for it. So at 48, I lost everything all in one evening. It's been going on a lot longer, I didn't know. I lost my wife, my boy, my job, my big cars, my house and everything. So I went on the pop. I disappeared down for about a good 4 weeks. Then someone down in London, a friend of mine who had a big business down here, sent for me, and finally, I'll skip this on, but he finally ended up in an hotel in Wakefield in Yorkshire to drag me out of bed on a Sunday morning and drag me down to Purfleet. That's a friend. He sobered me up, he kept me going, gave me a job, and of all places sent me back to Sheffield. I became accountant for what you know as Wilkinson Supermarkets. I started to rebuild my life, but I started to rebuild it in the old life that we'd had before. I met Anne. Anne took me to church in Harold Hill. I started to think, well, this ain't that bad. This isn't that bad. I can get on with this. So I started going. Many things happened along that route, and gradually there wasn't a sudden spurge of sunlight and I saw God and I was in his second seat. No. It just grew on me nice and steady, which is a good way to become a Christian. The trouble is, you always drag your bad bits with you along that road. If anybody who says that can pop up and be a Christian today and a bad boy tomorrow, it just does not work. Because the devil down there keeps dragging you back and pulling you back in his way. He likes you where you are. He don't like you going to God. But I persevered. We went through Harold Hill Church and we started to learn. Again, sadly, it wasn't the best of churches to go through. In the meantime, I'd met Joan. Now, you do not want this to go on half an hour, do you? So, I met Joan. Yeah, I met Joan. There was a couple of things happened quickly. The church I was at was not very good at teaching me. Why? Because I'm a Christian that doesn't always listen. I talk a lot. I don't always listen. I don't always believe. In fact, I believe that every Christian should understand. And they should understand firmly, every time you pick that Bible up, Jesus doesn't lie. He's incapable of lying. So if he says something, it has to be true. So if you go to church and somebody tells you something completely different, it can't be right. That's the way I took it. And people were telling me things that weren't in the Bible, or what were in the Bible that weren't true. So, it went wrong. Good vicar, things worked out. God acted very quickly in that time. I never laid a brick in earnest in my life, and I built a ramp in a church that cost £20,000 and built it, I think, fairly perfect. First thing I've ever seen in my life, I built a round wall and it was straight. I couldn't believe it. I'm convinced today that I was a labourer that day and Jesus was at the side of me laying bricks. I'm convinced, because I couldn't have laid them. Then there was other events we went through fairly quickly. We had a very simple event one day, I was working at the time, I'd changed around a bit, I was working in Manchester. And I had to persevere. 5 years solid in Manchester, working 5 days a week and living in Harold Hill in Romford. Up and down like a yo-yo. I had a car, did 172,000 miles in 14 months doing this job. The boy there was a good man. He was a good man, but not a Christian. Not a Christian. His wife went into hospital in Manchester to have a baby. And Anne will tell you what it was, I don't know. But the baby breached, was it, Anne? It came out of the womb and the liquid and everything came in and the baby breathed it. She had to have all sorts of operations quickly, and at 8 o'clock at night, the father, my boss technically, rang up and said that he was going to commit suicide because his wife and his little newborn daughter were going to die that evening. The doctors in the hospital told him. I kept her on the phone while Anne rang on another phone, because there were no mobiles. She had to go next door. She rang on another phone to get the father to go round to the house to get there quick before he did anything silly. I said to him, Gary, there's only one thing going to save you now. That's get on your knees now and pray with me. And we did. Cut story short, father arrived, we went to bed. 7 o'clock next morning, and you believe this not, I promise you, I wouldn't lie here. The phone rang and we're in bed. I said, well, Sunday morning, who's ringing at this time? So we went down, couldn't shut Gary up, couldn't shut him up. The wife was up having breakfast, and the baby had been took off the K unit. That was in less than 10 hours. When God wants to work, he can work fast. From there, went to another church, which was okay, but by this time fell in love with her. Can't say anymore. So she couldn't be left on her own. We had to go with her to look after her. So we changed churches, and she went to another church at Pilgrim's Arch, where we spent a really, really, really happy time. A good church, everything went okay. So much so, when she came here, again, we felt we had to follow. Big changes to change. Up homes, up jobs, do everything and change. But we've done it. Christian-wise, firmly believe now, and anybody who's any doubts whatsoever in this church that the road is easy, I ought to write a biography. You would read it, I assure you. You wouldn't want to know the first half. You'd throw it in bin before you go halfway through second, but you'd see, if you write last bit, you'd be all right. It's been a hard life, but I can truthfully say that all that time, Jesus has stood there. My wife bought, to finish, Joe, my wife bought, and I look at it every time I pass. I cry every time I read Footsteps. Anybody who doesn't has got something seriously wrong with them. And she bought one for children, and I look at that every time I pass it. And I think if ever truer words were said, that when you see those footsteps of Jesus walking alongside you, and then those footsteps disappear, never believe he's left you. You've collapsed. He's picked you up, and he's carrying you. That is true.